This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. I'm Evan Jansen. The show, of course, always live, broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube right now with the show available on demand on our YouTube channel. Now today, President Jacob Zuma will take to the podium in Parliament as the SONA debate continues. The head of the African Energy Indaba says South Africa doesn't have an energy crisis. We'll talk about that after our first break. And one family of the Nigerian church collapse are waiting for another round of DNA testing. We'll talk to them about that after our second break today. Then we'll close the show with Paul Minari and the recent heat waves we've been experiencing around South Africa. But first, let's get the day's news from Katrine Milan.
Well, hello and welcome to Newsroom. I'm Katrine Milan, and let's just take a look at those top stories this morning. President Jacob Zuma will today respond to fierce criticism following this week's debate on his State of the Nation address. Over the last 2 days, political parties levelled their concerns and raised questions on various matters. Focus on land reform, the energy crisis and race relations was brought to the spotlight.
50 farming enterprises will be identified as a pilot project regarding the 50-50 policy framework, which proposes relative rights for people who live and work on farms.
The honourable member has stood up here to disrupt a proper proceedings of this, so he's eating his own medicine.
If you look at those minutes, you will not find any indication of exactly what happened in terms of the jamming of the signal, the points of order taken in that regard, as well as the undertaking given by the Speaker that that matter will be investigated.
In other news, a protest turned violent at Mfuleni on the Cape Flats last night when residents set a bus and a truck alight. They are demanding houses, saying Khayelitsha residents are given preference over them. Police have been deployed to the township. It has been hit by a number of violent protests in recent months. Residents have vowed to continue protesting until government officials solve their housing problem. The National Institute for Communicable Diseases has confirmed that the 2 South Africans suspected of having Ebola have both tested negative. It was confirmed late yesterday that a South African technician who had been working in a mine in Guinea was a case of malaria following detailed tests. The second person, a doctor who had been working in Sierra Leone, has now also been confirmed negative to the deadly virus. Meanwhile, UN officials have urged member states not to get too comfortable with the recent gains in slowing the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. This as the 3 countries worst affected set a deadline of 60 days for achieving 0 new infections. The UN's emergency Ebola response mission warned that the impending rainy season in the region could complicate efforts to stamp out the virus. There was also a strong appeal for more money as the UN continues to face a significant shortfall in the cash it requires to fight Ebola in the year ahead. 37 mourners have been killed in Niger when an unidentified plane bombed a funeral. Witnesses say the military plane carried the colors of Nigeria, which was thought to have bombed the funeral accidentally when pursuing Boko Haram militants. Earlier, the Nigerian military said they killed 300 Boko Haram members in fighting in the northeast of the country. And Zimbabwe has beaten the United Arab Emirates by 4 wickets with 12 balls to spare at the ICC Cricket World Cup today in Nelson. Zim won the toss and sent the UAE into bat, and they made 285 for 7 in their 50 overs. The partnership between Sean Williams and Craig Irwin took the game away from the UAE. Williams was named a man of the match for his unbeaten 72 of 64 balls. This was still the closest game of the World Cup so far, and one in which the UAE, although they lost, showed they have potential. Remember, all those top stories and more are all available on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can then also keep up to date on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Well, Evan, over to you.
Thank you, Katrine. Top of the show, let's just quickly deal with a story that's caused quite a lot of consternation in the last 24 hours. Now, the National Institute for Communicable Diseases has confirmed the 2 South Africans suspected of having Ebola have both tested negative. Now, to give us the latest, we are now joined on the line by the Institute's Deputy Director, Lucille Bloomberg. A very good morning to you, Lucille. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Lucille, just give us a quick update. Much hysteria in the last 24 hours around this, but it is a negative.
Yes, not that much hysteria. I think we were confident about the first patient and quite rapidly made the diagnosis of malaria. And he's responded very well to treatment and is now out of isolation. And the second patient has improved, had really minor symptoms, but I think we have quite a low threshold for testing, especially for medical people, although she was not working in an Ebola treatment center. She was working on a mine.
And just a little bit more background on the two specific cases. I understand one was a medical doctor that's just returned.
Yes, well, as I've just mentioned, she does work in Sierra Leone, which is working on a mine, not in an Ebola treatment center. But, one has to be quite cautious, and we have quite a low threshold for Ebola testing, especially for any medical people who are working in the area. And I think, she was picked up early. I think the system at the airport worked very well. She reported feeling unwell, and she was referred rapidly, and we isolated her and did the necessary testing.
And what advice do you give ordinary South Africans now within this context?
I think the advice that we give all South Africans and people travelling on the continent is if you are travelling in Africa, you really must take your malaria prophylaxis. And that remains the much bigger risk.
Well, I thank you very much for joining us this morning and giving us a quick update on the story that's been doing the rounds. No, there's no Ebola in South Africa. The two cases that we had in the last 24, 48-hour cycle, they've both tested negative, one of them for malaria. We move on, of course, SONA debate today on everyone's minds. Yesterday, political parties focused on land reform, the energy crisis and race relations during the second day of debate. President Jacob Zuma State of the Nation address. He will reply to the debate in Parliament later today.
The emotive issue of land took centre stage.
The land in itself is not an infinite resource. Hence, fertile land and agricultural land, including grazing land, must be protected. The President has therefore called on the protection of land against foreign ownership.
Please take strategic control of our mineral resources. Take ownership of the mineral resources.
I and the majority of Afrikaners and English-speaking white people and all other minorities who call South Africa our only home will not allow someone else to decide whether we are African and whether we are patriotic.
Some opposition parties protested against the decision to call police into the chamber.
On the rise in police brutality, Mr. President, you must note that 11,880 criminal cases were opened with IPID between 2011 and 2012. It is very urgent that we demilitarize the police in keeping with the Constitution.
Others are concerned about the country's energy crisis.
The nation still remains extremely concerned that the ongoing load shedding by Eskom will in time lead to total blackout. This is not just an energy challenge, we are facing a serious crisis.
Government says despite the energy problem, strides have been made to electrify households.
Speaker, I'm very pleased to announce that the Medupi Unit 6 turbine commissioning I want to tell you this. When Medupi Unit 6 turbine commissioning has reached a critical milestone, it is now running at the optimum speed of 3,000 revolutions per minute.
Abra Barbia, SABC News, Parliament.
Now, the debate on the State of the Nation will come to an end when President Jacob takes to the podium to reply to issues raised by all parties. For the latest, we are joined by our parliamentary reporter, Lukhanyo Calata, who is in our parliamentary studio. Good morning, Lukhanyo.
Morning, Evan.
Intense debate yesterday. Lukhanyo, just take us through what you viewed as the highlights and maybe even the lowlights.
All right. Well, Eben, I think as the package just alluded to, I think the issue of land and land reform was quite critical in yesterday's debate. where the Deputy Minister of Forestry and Agriculture, Mr. Bheki Cele, was saying that land is not an infinite resource and that government was pushing ahead with the idea of putting a ceiling on land ownership, foreign land ownership of about 12,000 hectares for farmers. And obviously, the Freedom Front Plus was not very happy with that ceiling and the fact that foreign people cannot own land in South Africa, but they can have long-term leases. The Freedom Front Plus saying that why is the government driving Afrikaners and white people in general out of South Africa? And then there was the issue of Eskom. Where, as the package alluded to, the minister, Lynn Brown, basically saying that Medupe is now running, is up and running, and that is will assist in bringing down the level of load shedding that we're currently experiencing in the country. And then there was an issue, Eben, that was brought up by the Justice Minister, Mr. Michael Masuta. And he basically said that even if the South African National Defence Force was called into the National Assembly chamber last week, Thursday, to remove the EFF MPs, it would have been perfectly legitimate, I think, were his words. And obviously the EFF did not like that one bit. I think it was the EFF's Godrich Gardy who stood up and said, but they have a member who has not eaten for 4 days because she was assaulted by the security forces that came to remove them from the House last week. And so there were a lot of issues, there were a lot of tension in the House yesterday. But very critical was that it was a resumption of normal service. You know, this is what the debate on the State of the Nation has been over the years. And we were very happy to see, obviously, that normal service had resumed in Parliament.
Lukhanyo, one of the side stories yesterday was about insects, cockroaches in particular. Just tell us what happened. Actually, before we go there, Julius Malema has now accepted the apology of Bala Gambete for calling him a cockroach. Let's just have a look at the apology before I'm going to ask you to tell us what you think.
We welcome the apology with our open hand. We are human beings. Sometimes we get carried away by emotions. We commit mistakes, particularly people who work together. We are bound to talk past each other sometimes. And that apology is well accepted. And I also want to send an apology to the leader of the DA for having called a cockroach myself when I was still very young. I now know how it feels to be called a cockroach.
A very reconciliatory tone in the gestures, and that's been the case pretty much the whole week. Just talk about the apology first and how this sort of ended up being the backstory to yesterday's debates.
Reconciliatory indeed, wasn't it, Yeben? And I think that has kind of set the tone. Because I think what has been taking place ever since the comment was made by the Speaker, there's been a lot of outcry, and not just from the EFF, but I think from the media as well as from the public in general. So yesterday, the Speaker called us into her office, and she basically retracted the comments that she had made, saying that she is a leader not in her organization, she's a leader in Parliament, but she's also a leader in the country, and it was inappropriate. After much consideration, she realized that it was inappropriate for her to have made those statements, and she came forward and she apologized. Julius Malema accepted it quite graciously. And himself, even then, issuing apology, as we've just heard, to the leader of the Democratic Alliance, Helen Zille. But I think what this apology and the acceptance means is that there's likely to be a slightly less tension in the House this afternoon. We saw over the last 2 days that it was the NCOP chairperson, Thandi Modise, who was leading or chairing the sessions in the House. We do expect, after having made this apology, that today we will see Ubaleka Mbete, and we do expect to see much calmer tension, a very cordial relationship between MPs, especially of the EFF, as well as the Speaker. We're hoping at least that is what the backstory of yesterday will lead to today. Eben.
Today, the expectation, of course, the President will be taking to the podium. There have been lots of points of order raised in the last couple of days. What's your expectation? You say it's going to be a lot more cordial. The EFF already have pointed out their big day will be the 11th of March when they will be putting their questions forward.
Eben, you're right. The 11th of March is the day, I think, where the National Assembly will discuss the report on Nkandla. So the EFF have already said that's their date. That's the date when they will deal with President Jacob Zuma. I do expect today for there to be, the President will come and he will then respond, because what we've seen over the last 2 days is everybody having their say on his State of the Nation address. Everybody have now spoken. So, and what we do expect is for the MPs to then listen then to the President responding to what their concerns have been, responding to what they have said over the last 2 days. We do expect him to respond quite critically to the matter that was raised by the Democratic Alliance as the parliamentary leader Mmusi Maimane. Remember his speech, we saw it over the last 2 days everywhere, saying the president was a broken man presiding over a broken society. We would expect that the president would respond to that. We'd expect the president to respond to the issues raised by the EFF. We would expect the president possibly to touch on the issue raised yesterday by COPE. By COPE leader Misiwa Lekota, where he's basically saying that there's rising police brutality in the country. So those are some of the issues. We do hope that the president touches on the issue of land to clarify a little bit further. Unfortunately, we do not expect there to be any of what happened last week, where the security forces are called into the House to come and remove members. If that happens, I'm sure everybody in the country would agree it would be very unfortunate. Eben.
Lukhanyo, thank you very much for that contribution this morning. Putting us in the picture out of Parliament Live, Lukhanyo Kalata, who is our parliamentary reporter, has done a superb job, I have to say, dealing with a difficult week in Parliament. Time now for us to take a look at your tweets. Please remember to send us your views at SABC Newsroom. Of course, we're talking about things that affect us directly. Now, heatwave, that's been on everyone's mind. We'll be talking to Paul Munari later about this heatwave that's not going away, it seems. It's going to be 35 degrees on Saturday. I'll be at the beach. Heatwave, she says. Jessica talks about, 34 and 36 degrees this weekend? No jackets. And Victoria Carl says, can't wait for it to be above 20 degrees again. Yes, Gauteng weather says heatwave will persistently high temperatures expected in Gauteng on Thursday. 32 degrees in Johannesburg, 33 in Vereeniging, and 34 in Pretoria. Let's now take a look at front pages from around the rest of the world. Most international papers are looking at the extreme weather conditions in parts of the world. There, the Daily News in Turkey is reporting on the snowstorm in Istanbul. Grounded planes, halted traffic, and forced the closure of the Bosphorus Strait shipping channel yesterday. In the United States, the Washington Post is also looking at the storm there that delivered 2 to 6 inches of snow. And the Boston Globe says a college there faces an inquiry over disability access that has also been made more difficult during the current weather conditions. What's happening in South Africa? Let's take a look at what's happening on our diary here. In Johannesburg, Gauteng Community Safety MEC Sizakele Nkosi Malobane is expected to brief the media at 10 a.m. on the Gauteng Youth Safety Summit. Then in Cape Town, of course, in Parliament, The post-cabinet briefing by Performance Monitoring and Evaluation Minister in the Presidency, Jeff Radebe, is also set for 10 a.m. We stay in Parliament. The National Assembly and National Council of Provinces will meet when President Jacob Zuma replies to the debate on his State of the Nation address. That's at 2 p.m., 2 o'clock this afternoon. We'll be live on this very channel with the President's response to the SONA debate of the last couple of days. Time for us to take a break. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News.
Zoom into Africa. This is Algeria. The president is Mr. Abdelaziz Bouteflika. Algeria got independent from France on 3 July 1914. The population is more than 36 million people. One of the major languages spoken is Arabic. Monetary unit is dinar.
Welcome back. This is Newsroom here on SABC News. Now, Medupi's Unit 6 turbine is now running at optimum speed, and although Eskom's woes still has South Africa in a state of turmoil, this doesn't mean that the country is sitting with an energy crisis. This is what the head of the Africa Energy Indaba recently told professionals at Africa's most recognized energy event that's held in Sandton over the past 2 days. More than 120 speakers shared their thoughts on enabling adequate energy generation across the African continent. One of those speakers joins us today. In studio, we have the head of energy at the NEPAD Energy Agency, Professor Mossad El-Misiri. A very good morning to you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us. We heard, what are your views on the energy crisis in South Africa? Do we have an energy crisis in your estimation?
I think when you read the newspaper and the way we live, definitely there is energy shortage. There's no doubt about that. And the country is in its way to solve it. If I refer to the President address to the nation, he did really outline short-term, medium-term, long-term solution to the energy crisis in South Africa. But energy shortage is not only South Africa, it cuts across the whole continent. This is why we are here in NEPAD. What we are doing in NEPAD to ensure that the energy shortage across the whole continent is attended to. And there is no actual number of programs which we are attending to it on a continental level. You may have heard about the ambitious program for energy infrastructure in Africa called PIDA, program which was endorsed by the head of the state and the government in 2012 as the continent priority programs. In that program, there is what we call it high priority energy program, which we have to implement by 2020. Among this actually high priority energy program, there are 9 energy generation projects, 4 continental corridors, which will connect the whole continent from north to south, east to west, central south, central actually north, and ensure that energy is generated where it is most economical and moved and transported to where it is highly needed. This is what we call it PIDA, Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa. And we are moving ahead, NEPAD agency, being tasked by the head of the state and the government to implement that program. And we are actually in the process of implementing it as we speak now.
What are the threats to this project not being implemented on time? And do you see energy shortage as a threat to the economic growth on the entire African continent over the next decade?
As you actually may have noted that, or heard, or read, Africa is blessed with enormous resource of energy, be it hydro in Central Africa, be it gas in Central and the North, be it coal in Southern Africa, be it renewable energy, bioenergy, geothermal along the Rift Valley, though the availability of energy resources is not a problem in Africa, but its utilization is the challenge which we are meeting. If you look to the population of Africa, we are close to 1 billion. 2/3 of our population have no access to energy, in spite of commendable effort actually by a number of countries in Africa. So now we are looking why we are behind. Of course, there are some historical reasons behind that. But what I can actually tell the nation that we are in the way to really attend to that energy challenge. Our main challenge which we are facing now, actually there are 3 challenges which were identified in the last meeting of the head of state in Dakar, called Dakar Finance Summit. To have a project and you can attract investment, you need to bring that project to what we call it bankability, a project which attracts investors, a project which reaches a level which addresses all the investors actually concerned. So this is one bottleneck which you are attending to it. Another bottleneck is what we call it, how do we create environment for private sector investment and participating, the conducive environment. This is policies, regulations, capacity building, developing actually stable market, a stable tariff, all this sort of thing come under these conditions here.
In South Africa right now, there's a big conversation around privatizing of the energy sector. What are your views as NEPAD on that?
You see, privatization can go right and can go wrong. And with actually the power generation here in South Africa, mainly generated actually and controlled by Eskom, there is no harm of introducing degree of privatization gradually. You can't really dismantle a big organization like Eskom in one go and privatize it. Yes. There is some actual example where privatization worked, as in UK. There's some other example where it didn't work. And with South Africa, they have to really follow a gradual approach, allow the independent private actual generators to come in, and this is what's happening now. If you look to window 1, window 2, window 3, you've managed to really secure 4,000 megawatt actually from the IPP. This is the right approach. Let them come hand in hand, and the competition will control the market itself, and they will give the lead to whoever actually offer better service to the consumer at the end of the day.
Thank you for wonderful insights. It's always nice to get a different perspective. Often in South Africa, we can be very insular in the way that we look at things. But I thank you for joining us this morning. That is the head of energy at the NEPAD Energy Agency, Professor Mossad El-Misiri, joining us live in our newsroom studio. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Let's have a quick look at your thoughts on this matter. What are you saying around the energy scenarios that's playing out here in South Africa? Dachi says, if I had lots of money, I would invest it in Africa. Smart money is invested in the energy sector in Africa. That's right, Dachi. Sarah Evans, her view, hashtag Africa Energy Indaba, suggestion that smaller power plants equals less opportunity for corruption, cheaper and easier to build than mega plants. Leon Fantonda says, Africa blessed with scarce resources, with abundance of energy, but a lack of power. That's exactly what we spoke about. Now, Rulani says, regional connection includes not only the sharing of resources, but the sharing of a vision, a common policy, even talking about the African Energy Indaba. Now, we stay with energy, but we move to the alternative energy sector in Nigeria. At the end of last year, energy experts came together at the annual Nigerian Alternative Energy Expo to discuss and brainstorm alternative energy objectives. Nigeria ranks high in the World Bank's Renewable Energy Best Prospects Study, which identifies markets with good potential for renewable energy products and services. The expo gained momentum with a lot of spin-offs and feedback from the Nigerian government. There were also South African companies that gained solid dealings from the expo. To further this discussion, we're joined by Oli Malabane from the Center for Export Development and Tony Mashao, who is the director and founder of Siyaka energy. A very good morning to you, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
From what I've heard, huge success at the Expo last year. How has it gone since then?
Well, it has been great. Obviously, the Expo in Nigeria, we actually had a lot of interaction with other, colleagues in Nigeria.
What were the key factors that were highlighted at the Expo?
The Department of Trade and Industry has played an important impact in developing the BEE Codes of Good Practice. From that, we specifically looked at what makes for successful corporate social investment, enterprise development, and skills development programs. We realized that the best of these programs is to partner with as many stakeholders as possible around the already green oasis that has been created by the Alternative Energy Association so that future investments can evolve.
You've brought a panel in for us today. Just give us an idea of how this works and how we on the continent are going to benefit.
Yeah, I think, when we were coming here, my thinking was that it's very easy for us to talk about renewable energy, to talk about all those concepts. And people still think that it's a concept somewhere.
Yes.
Now, how do I actually take advantage of renewable energy or probably solar? So that's why we brought this solar panel. This is actually a simple, you can see that it's not as big, But what you do with this solution is that you have lights, solar lights, then you charge it. Obviously, you use the sun. And what happens is that you can also, put your cell phone chargers and all of that. Now, at the moment, with the challenge that we have with load shedding and also rural areas where there's still a big gap in terms of electrification, this is a solution. And Africa has an abundance of natural resources. Actually, if you look at the sun and what we have in Africa is in
hydro,
abundance.
sun,
hydro, and all those. Okay, so now now this is what people can ordinarily use as a household.
The Expo, what will this year's focus then be on?
We got a lot of spin-offs from last year's Expo. It has obviously built momentum, and we're getting a lot of response from the government of Nigeria, the Ministry of Power. There's a company that is based in Cape Town called Cape Africa. It will be installing about 1,000 units of 5 kilowatts solar panels to Ogun State in Nigeria, as well as Oguhlaza Energy.
SMMEs, is that the key to unlocking the potential that we have in this sector? And are we on track to achieve the goals that we set out?
Your question is a very important one because we have to use. Currently, people are saying we have a problem. We have an energy crisis.
Yeah.
But for entrepreneurs, it's not a crisis, it's an opportunity.
Yes.
Because it gives us an opportunity now to actually develop SMMEs and basically give them support because some of these technologies are not complex to actually implement or to educate our people. So definitely there is a big opportunity for SMMEs in South Africa to actually also promote youth entrepreneurship and get young people trained so that they can go out there and actually deploy these technologies and solutions.
In conclusion, the main role of the Center for Export Development in this whole process?
The Center for Export Development is a Section 21 organization. It's a market research company. What we do is our strategy is to prepare entrepreneurs for export readiness. It's to also facilitate trade missions in Africa from grassroots level right up to A and B income status.
Well, gentlemen, I thank you for joining today.
Thank you.
You're on the right track. I agree with you. In Japanese, the icon for crisis and opportunity, exactly the same thing.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us today. We're talking renewable energy, of course. And the tweet of the day is related to this. Rulani says, good projects and good ideas will always find the money. Talking about the Africa Energy Indaba. And I think the best way to save the planet is nuclear power. It has one of the smallest pollution rates and very low mortality. That one from Ramon Reyes. I've got my lines crossed here, but I'll blame the producers for that. Let's take a look now at what's happening on our Newsroom Facebook page. Of course, there you'll see United Nations officials have urged member states not to sit on their laurels despite major gains in slaying the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. This is the 3 countries worst affected, set a deadline of 60 days now for achieving 0 new infections. Then back home, government has blamed human error for the cell phone signal jamming during the State of the Nation address in Parliament a week ago. And the family of a teen who died at Eden Park Secondary School on Gauteng's East Rand on Monday says it's still searching for answers and wants to know exactly how their child died. It is alleged the 17-year-old Lerato Malakutu fell and hit her head after another pupil pulled the chair from underneath her. Interesting story. Remember, you'll find all of those and a whole lot more on our Newsroom Facebook page. Go on there and like it. We will like you for it. Of course, also sabc.co.za/news for all the latest updates all of the time. Time for us to take a break. This is Newsroom on SABC News.
Healthy food is not always the cheapest food option, and so making the healthy choices, the easier choices, remain a health challenge for South African children.
Bipolar disorder is said to affect 1 in 100 people.
Low back pain, the most common spinal disorder, affects about 8 out of 10 people at some point in their lives.
Back pain persists for more than a week or 2. Seek advice.
I'm Dr. Cyril Mutau. Watch Health Talk every Saturday on SABC.
Well, hello and welcome back here with Newsroom on SABC News. Let's just take a look at those top stories this morning. President Jacob Zuma will today respond to fierce criticism following this week's debate on his State of the Nation address. Over the last 2 days, political parties levelled their concerns and raised questions on various matters. Focus on land reform, the energy crisis and race relations were brought to the spotlight. The National Institute for Communicable Diseases has confirmed that the 2 South Africans suspected of having Ebola have both tested negative. It was confirmed late yesterday that a South African technician who had been working in a mine in Guinea was a case of malaria following detailed tests. The second person, a doctor who had been working in Sierra Leone, has now also been confirmed negative to the deadly virus. And Zimbabwe has beaten the United Arab Emirates by 4 wickets with 12 balls to spare at the ICC Cricket World Cup today in Nelson. Zim won the toss and sent the UAE into bat, and they made 285 for 7 in their 50 overs. The partnership between Sean Williams and Craig Irwin took the game away from the UAE. Williams was named man of the match for his unbeaten 72 off 64 balls. This was still the closest game of the World Cup so far, and one in which the UAE, although they lost, showed they have potential. Well, remember, all those top stories and more are all available on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can then also keep up to date on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Well, Evan, back to you.
Thank you very much, Katrine. Yes, Paul, you also look like an anchor. He says, well, he looked at that shot, he says, oh, I look like an anchor.
Yeah, it must be the jib, yeah.
It must be. Well, Paul, let's do this properly. Heat wave conditions hit the West Coast and the Western Cape and parts of the Northern Cape last week. This week, rather. Last week, we saw temperatures all over the country rose to around 40 degrees. That was in the northwest, while places like Appington in the Northern Cape reached over 42 degrees over consecutive days. Now, Paul is here, who's our weather and environmental specialist guru. Call him what you like. Paul Tsietse Monare, and he's going to tell us about the scorching temperatures. Good morning, Paul. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you, Evan.
Global warming, is it, or is it just normal practice for this time of the year?
Certainly. Global warming, yes. You know, in large or at large, it's a real cause to why the planet is heating up. But at a smaller scale, a more local scale, if you look at, or regional scale, whatever you want to call it, if you look at South Africa, I mean, February is usually our hottest month. And that's what's been happening. Temperatures just not dropping. And the reason we call it a heat wave, or we classify it into a heat wave, is because temperatures just keep on rising. I like these visuals, but if you could just cut to the weather system visuals quickly.
Yeah. Weather system visuals, please.
Yeah. You'll see there's been a, let me get my device also ready here.
Yes.
There's been a high pressure cell over the central parts of southern Africa, especially into Botswana, the northwest province, as well as into some parts of Gauteng.
Yeah.
And there it is.
There's your weather system. You've got your remote there.
I've got my remote.
Just explain to us where we are.
Yeah. You see, this is basically just showing the pressure that you're experiencing in southern Africa.
Yeah.
And you see the lines, they're called isobars because they're showing areas with the same pressure readings. So where the H is, that's where a high pressure cell is.
Yes.
And we usually, when we have a high pressure like that in winter, it's usually meaning clear weather, no clouds, no rain, and the sun is out. But when you have it in summer like that, it's actually leading to heat conditions or lots of, like the hot air does not normally rise to form rain like what you would find at the L, the low pressure.
The low pressure, yes.
So the hot air does not rise. It just stays here above the surface, and it's actually keeping us hot.
It's almost like it's compressed in the atmosphere.
Yeah. And so what has happened is, you see where the H is going now. That's pretty much where it was about 2 weeks ago, last week. And that's why we experienced it so much, especially right there where it is, by the northwest province as well as into Gauteng. And temperatures rose. I remember we had 34 degrees in Johannesburg. It was really, really hot. And we had 42 in Upington, and those temperatures stayed like that for 2 days, 3 days. And when that happens, when temperatures are 5 degrees above normal temperatures for 3 days in a row, that's what we call a heat wave. And that's exactly what happened there.
What's the expectation? Are we going to see more of this?
I'm glad you asked it. Just have a look at this. This is an hourly forecast for Johannesburg, right? So starting from 10 o'clock. So we're expecting this. I just picked tomorrow, Friday, because Friday was a Friday.
Yes.
So what's going to happen is temperatures there, 10 o'clock, start already at around 30 degrees. Now, even that's really hot for 10 o'clock in the morning.
That's very hot for 10 in the morning.
And then if you go to 8 o'clock,
that's hot
it's still 22.
Yeah,
it's really... So these temperatures are staying quite high, and when hot surfaces, or when we experience hot surfaces for such periods, throughout the entire day, we expect it to really sweat, and so, it's going to be quite devastating,
Yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a hot weekend also. But now, what's your advice then to people at this time? We've got energy problems. We don't want to put the fan on all night. We don't want to have the pool pump on all the time. What do we do?
Yeah, well, it's a bit difficult, because in summer, yes, there isn't much. Because in winter, you can always put on clothes on, have hot water bottle, and so on. But you can't have a cold water bottle in summer. Yeah, so the best thing is rather try to be outdoors in the shade. If you're going to be outdoors, go swimming, stay in the pools. With the electricity crisis that we're experiencing, yes, the swimming pool pumps and also air conditioning on, we'll have problems there. But, you can have ice water, really, really cold water. I would never really say go have a beer, but, those are some of the things that you can actually do, especially staying in the shade, and sunscreen for people with less melanin.
Now that you mentioned the beer, probably Lynn Brown, our minister, said yesterday that one of the ways to curb the load shedding is to switch the beer fridges off all over the country in all the bottle stores. How do you view that, and will that really make a difference?
I don't think it will make a difference. Look, people don't drink temperature, they drink beer. So whether it's warm or whether it's too cold, people will still drink the beer. And you don't need cold whiskey, and you don't need, your wine does not need to be super chilled. As long as it's room temperatures, people will find ways. And I really don't think it will help. People will still find beer
attractive. Okay, Paul. Thank you.
But it's worth a try. It's worth
a shot, isn't it? Well, Paul Tsietse Monare, always giving us wonderful insights into what is going on around us. At times we can be quite unconscious, and I include myself in that. You don't really think about how you impact the environment around you. It's something that we should be more conscious of. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Now, after talking about the heat wave here, let's take a look at some of the tweeted pictures of the snowstorms in the United States and Turkey. Can you imagine that? please remember at SABC Newsroom. That's where we're at. There we have a picture. Where's this picture from? No classes tomorrow. Snowstorm. That one is in Istanbul. Can you imagine that? Cancelled. Hope for the best. Snowstorm. That's the picture there. There we have another whiteout picture. My first whiteout blizzard on the highway. First time. That one is from Ken or Ash Shanna. Tonight already. Pike Valley Snowstorm Instagram. That one is from Blake Branham. And, well, those are some of the pictures incoming. Oh, looks like we missed it. Now, today, we're going to clothes. Months after the Nigerian church collapsed, disaster families and loved ones have finally found closure. For many, the goodbyes have been said and the tears shed. But for one family, the death of the daughter still haunts them. The Mkhulisi family have decided to wait for another round of DNA testing to ensure the remains are in fact that of their daughter Patricia. The remains of 11 people were flown in from Nigeria at the beginning of this month. They were among the 115 people killed during the collapse of the Synagogue Church of All Nations guest house. That was on September the 12th last year. While government has confirmed that Patricia Khaleesi's remains have been brought back, her family wants another opinion from private forensic scientists. Now joining us is the family spokesperson, that's Patricia's brother, Luandle Mkhulisi, as well as her son, Brian Mkhulisi. Very good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for coming in. I understand it's a very difficult scenario, but if you can just give us the family's view on the matter of the DNA testing.
Yes, we are trying to find closure, actually. But now we are being prevented from finding this closure. The government sent a directive to one of the private pathologists that we took with. They said, no, you cannot do the DNA testing. The bodies must not be open.
Is that the main reason that you suspect that your sister, it might be the wrong remains in this case?
Yes, okay, to start with, when we received the body, we only received the death certificate. In that death certificate, there is a part where there's supposed to be a thumbprint for the disease. In our case, there's no thumbprint. And if there's no thumbprint, it's supposed to give a reason why there's no thumbprint. Right. And then firstly, they refused us to see what's inside the bag because we're given a bag, a grey bag. Mm. They said, no, we cannot view the body there. We must take the body to a private mortuary. We cannot view the body, simply just take it to the private mortuary. And then when we got there at the private mortuary, we simply defied it and then opened the bag. Mm. What we found there is that my sister had a gap in her front teeth, the main one, the big ones. That person doesn't have a gap. 2, a day before the bodies were brought back, we received a call from a colonel. He said, no, he wants to know whether does my sister have any distinguishable marks, birth marks, anything of that sort. And then when we got there, that body doesn't have a skin. No skin at all, skinless. You only see muscles and fat inside. I'm sorry to describe, but I have to tell you this. No skin. Then how are we supposed to know who is this person? Because the first 2 things that we were looking for are not there. Also, it's very difficult to see because that person had head injuries. Yeah. So some of the features are sort of like disappeared, so to speak. Yeah. Yes.
Brian, I want to ask you, it must have been a very difficult couple of months for the family. It must have been a difficult last few weeks for you guys with your mother. How have you guys been coping with what's been going on now?
It's very difficult, very, very difficult, whereby as the family have thought that we are finally going to have closure. Then here's another problem occurs. So now it's very sad for the whole family. Yes.
Luandle, I understand your family also wanted to travel to Nigeria. to find some sort of closure because you're having this difficult time. Just tell us why you're thinking in that way.
You see, we come from this cultural background. We observe some of these things. We still observe them. As we speak, my mother is still sitting on a mattress. We cannot be seen in any gatherings. Even another funeral cannot be seen there. So as part of, if an accident like this happens, we as a family are supposed to go there and fetch the spirit. We've done all the arrangement. We went to Department of Agriculture and Forestry because we'll be carrying a twig. Some of the people, they know what I'm talking about. We'll be carrying a twig. So we know that we are not supposed to bring a foreign plant in a foreign country. We went to the Department of Agriculture to get this permission to go and perform this ritual in Nigeria. It's supposed to be done in Nigeria, nowhere else. Yes. Then we'll have a complete closure, and then we'll bring the spirit back with us, and then we'll have a complete closure.
In conclusion, Brian, tell us about your mother. What kind of person was she like?
She was a good and loving, humble person who was always willing to help the others in the society.
Well, gentlemen, it's a very, very difficult time. We hope that you find closure. We hope that this process is now expedited. When are you hoping to complete the second DNA test?
We're having a problem. When we got to the mortuary, we were giving this. We never receive it ourselves. We're giving this from the Department of Health. And we send an email to this director. This is what we wrote on the email. And then, I don't know, if they apply any delaying tactics, we're prepared to take the matter to the highest court.
Well, it's a difficult process that is ahead of you. It's a difficult process for everyone involved. I thank you for joining us today. It's a difficult thing to say goodbye when you don't think you are saying goodbye.
To the right person.
Thank you very much for joining us today. On this very difficult note, we end today's program. Newsroom broadcast live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. The show then repeats at 2 in the afternoon with a rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following day. We also stream live on YouTube at that time with the show available on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom.